Yes, it does. Exactly. Okay.
Bridges. Buckner. Coleman. Cook. Coram. Danielson. Donovan. Fields. Gardner. Janal. Gonzalez. Hanson. Henriksen. Heisey. Holbert. Hawkes Lewis. Kirkmeyer. Kolker. Lee. Liston. Lundeen. Moreno. Pedersen. Priola. Rankin. Rodriguez. Scott. Simpson. Smallwood. Sonnenberg. Story.
Here.
Winter. Woodward. Zenzinger. Bridges. Gardner. Janal. Gonzalez. Heisey. Holbert. Kirkmeyer. Kolker. Lee.
Here.
Lundeen. Scott.
Yeah.
Bridges. Janal. Holbert. Kolker.
Here. Here.
Janal. Holbert. Janal. Janal. Mr. President,
Here. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the call be raised.
Motion is to raise the call. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the call is raised. Committee reports.
May 6, 2022, the Committee on State, Veterans, and Military Affairs, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1370 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. May 6, 2022, Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Concurrent Resolution 1006 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. May 6, 2022, the Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1376 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee of Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1119 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1385 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1254 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1406 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1392 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1381 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1401 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation.
Members, I think I did it earlier, but the coat rule is relaxed for the Senate. Message from the House.
May 6, 2022, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the reviser of statute Senate Bill 238 amended as printed in House Journal May 5, 2022 and amended on third reading and is printed in House Journal May 6, 2022.
Message from the reviser.
May 6, 2022, we herewith transmit without comment as amended Senate Bill 238.
Consideration of House amendments. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 238?
Senate Bill 238, Senators Hansen and Rankin, Representatives Weissman and Neville, concerning reductions in real property taxation for only the 2023 and 2024 property tax years and in connection therewith, reducing the assessment rates for certain classes of non-residential property and all residential property in the amount of actual value to which the rate is applied for all residential real property and commercial property for 2023, reducing the assessment rates for all multifamily residential real property to a set amount for 2024, reducing the assessment rates for all residential real property other than multifamily residential real property for 2024 by an amount determined by the property tax administrator to cumulatively with the other provisions of the bill reduce statewide property tax revenue for 2023 and 2024 by a specified amount, reducing the assessment rates for real and personal property that is classified as agricultural or renewable energy production property for 2024 and requiring the state to reimburse local governments excluding school districts in 2024 for 2023 reductions in the property tax revenue resulting from the bill.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 238.
Any explanation, Senator Hansen?
Mr. President, thank you. I would be very happy to. First, the House had to fix a drafting issue with the amendment that was brought in the Senate from the good senator from Weld County, so we got that fixed. Just a technical correction to that one. The second amendment that they added in the House, as you may remember, I described this bill as a little bit of the peeling the onion back across the districts in the state. So the House decided in their infinite wisdom to add health service districts to the list of special districts to get 90% instead of 65. So we'll be protecting some of the, that's right, health services districts, EMS, hospitals, etc. So I think this is a nice addition to the bill, and I urge concurrence.
The motion is that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 238. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 2 excused, the motion is adopted. Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the repassage of Senate Bill 238.
The motion is the repassage of Senate Bill 238. Are there any no votes?
I think you want to take that.
I might. I have before.
Congratulations, sir.
Good job.
Good work.
With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 2 excused, Senate Bill 238 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate take up House Bill 1005, House Bill 1006, House Bill 1149, 1246, 1283, 1405, 1407, and 1410 on special orders, second reading consent calendar at the hour of 4:10 p.m.
The motion is that the Senate take up House Bills 1005, 1006, 1149, 1246, 1283, 1405, 1407, and 1410 on special orders consent at the hour of 4:10 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Hey!
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. The Senate will take up the previously mentioned bills on special orders consent at the hour of 4:10 p.m. Special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar, Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve this of the Committee of the Whole for consideration of special order second reading of bills consent calendar.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the special order second reading of bills consent calendar, and Senator Coleman will take the chair.
Committee will come to order, and the code rule is relaxed for everybody up in here. Will the clerk please read the title of all the bills on the special order second reading of the bills consent calendar?
House Bill 1005, Representatives McCluskey and Will, Senator Rankin, concerning modifications to the existing tax credit for rural and frontier healthcare receptors. House Bill 1006, Representative Robertson Van Winkle, Senators Donovan and Smallwood, concerning the property tax exemption for property used as an integral part of a child care center. House Bill 1149, Representatives Lynch and Byrd, Senators Rankin and Hansen, concerning the expansion of the Advanced Industry Investment Tax Credit and in connection therewith making an appropriation. House Bill 1246, Representatives Lantin and Senator Buckner, concerning the registration of a pharmacy located within a hospice inpatient unit as a specialized prescription drug outlet and in connection therewith making an appropriation. House Bill 1283, Representatives Michelson, Janae, and Bradfield, Senators Buckner and Priolo, concerning enhanced residential services for persons with behavioral health needs and in connection therewith making an appropriation. House Bill 1405, Representative Lindsay, Senator Huckas Lewis, concerning the inclusion of faculty in the definition of key participant for the industrial hemp regulatory program to align the program with federal law. House Bill 1407, Representative Valdez D. and Ortiz, Senator Henriksen, concerning requiring post-secondary institutions to permit veterans to audit courses. House Bill 1410, Representatives Byrd and Rich, Senators Holbert and Rodriguez, concerning the regulation of certain financial services businesses and in connection therewith permitting employees of a supervised lender to work from a remote location and removing the requirement for a debt management services provider to submit criminal history record check results for agents of the provider.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the passage of all the bills on the special orders second reading consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1005, House Bill 1006, and the Associated Finance Committee report, House Bill 1149 and the Associated Finance Committee report, House Bill 1246 and the Associated Finance Committee report, House Bill 1283 and the Associated Appropriations Committee report, House Bill 1405, 1407, and 1410.
Is there any discussion on the committee reports? Motion for the body's adoption of all the committee reports on special order second reading of the bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee reports are adopted. Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the consent calendar? The motion for the body is the adoption of all the bills in the special order second reading of the bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
Motion for the committee to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has had a number of bills in consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1005, House Bill 1006 is amended, House Bill 1149 is amended, House Bill 1246 is amended, House Bill 1283 is amended, House Bill 1405, 1407, 1410 passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the report.
Motion is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, to excuse the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. House Bill 1005, House Bill 1006 is amended, House Bill 1149 as amended, House Bill 1246 is amended, House Bill 1283 is amended, House Bill 1405, 1407, 1410 passed on second reading in order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate take up House Bill 1394, 1400, 1233, 1314, 1011, 1012, 1051, 1151, 1240, 1281, 1302, 1303, 1308, 1358, 1367, 1380, 1393, 1397, and 1409 on special orders at the hour of 4:16 p.m.
The motion is that the Senate take up all of those bills on special orders at the hour of 4:16 p.m. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. The Senate will take up those bills on special orders at the hour of 4:16 p.m. Special orders, second reading of bills. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of special orders, second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the special orders, second reading of bills, and Senator Coleman will take the chair.
The committee will come to order, and the court rule is relaxed for everybody up in here. Would the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1394?
House Bill 1394, Representatives Esgar and Roberts, Senators Winter and Donovan, concerning funding for just transition programs to assist communities with economic transitions and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Madam President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1394 and the Appropriations Committee reports.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Madam President Pro Tem.
The Appropriations Committee report reviewed the appropriation from the House and maintained it.
Motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. There's an amendment to the desk. Would the clerk please read L005?
Amendment L005, Senator Donovan, strike the appropriations.
Madam President Pro Tem.
Thank you. I move L005 to 1394.
That's a proper motion. To the amendment, Madam President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This appropriation, we attempted to walk a line in the Appropriations Committee that we discovered had additional conflicts we couldn't resolve, so we actually removed that. And then we add in a section to require a presentation of a report to the JBC to provide some accountability for how these dollars are being spent. I am very much grateful, as I think as well as a number of the members of the General Assembly are, to the amount of dollars that the General Assembly has committed to helping transitional coal communities come up with new economies and support those workers. But we are not seeing those dollars get out of the Office of Transition nearly as efficiently as we feel the communities need them. So this report that will fall in the fall, this report that will occur in the fall will give the GBC the needed information to act accordingly to make sure that the Office of Just Transition is doing what they've been directed to do. And I ask for an aye vote on L005.
Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to address this because I had asked for and gotten an amendment during appropriations for an actual appropriation. And I want to talk about this a little bit because it's really key for all of us, I think. We are committing a lot of money. A lot of one-time money is going into big cash funds. And in general, what we've got is we've had requests for the money to be so-called continuously appropriated, which means we would never see it again. We would never review the progress. I have serious concerns that we can actually get the money committed and spent, and that it goes to the right areas where the legislature intended, because many of these bills are really just wide open. I'm on some of them. So I had asked for an actual appropriation. Now, the difference between an appropriation and a report is really good, really interesting. An appropriation means we vote on moving money out of a cash fund to spending authority. A report means that a report gets written and sent. How many of you actually read all those reports that you get notified of? I don't see any hands. Senator Liston thought he might raise his hand, but he didn't. I'm sorry, the senator from El Paso County. So it's really a dilemma for us, I believe. I think we ought to all take really seriously how we're going to review the spending of this one-time money in the 3-4 year period that it's getting spent. It's got to get out the door, and it's got to go to the right stuff. So I have been asking for an appropriation. I'm willing to accept this change, but I want us to think about, maybe during the SMART Act, maybe during a different JBC mechanism, that we actually do a deep dive review of all of these reports. So far, I've seen maybe 10 of them accumulate, so it's going to be a big lift. But I asked for a yes vote on the amendment. I'm not against this amendment, but I'm seeing a trend where people want to submit a report rather than have an appropriation, and that's dangerous.
Motion is Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise and would like to echo some of the comments you've just heard. And as a policy-making tool, I think perhaps we might need to require presentation. The reality is that if we have to sit down and pay attention, somebody else has to prepare the report and come sit with us. We give it a little bit more attention. This report on your email, it's too easy to put it in that file marked NFA, no further action, or reports where they pile up tens upon hundreds upon thousands. The reality is, as policymakers, money is policy. And this is one of those years where, boy, the policy's been flying out the door. I mean, we are just got so many things going on where we need to actually pay close attention. So I rise and would like to echo some of the comments that we heard from the good senator from Carbondale, incidentally, from a district that is affected dramatically by this particular bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Motion is the adoption of L005. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. L005 is adopted. Any further discussion on 1394? Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This money is incredibly important to be supporting the transition, especially on communities that were built around coal. And for the Office of Just Transition, these communities need these resources now, and I encourage you to get the money out as quickly as possible.
Madam President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you guys will remember a number of years ago, we actually carried the enacting legislation to create this Office of Transition. I really still try to avoid the word just, even though I carried the bill that made it. And one of our primary complaints and concerns that Senator Rankin, myself, and others, and Senator Winter brought to the well was we were making an office without a lot of resources to help pretty significant problems across Western Colorado. So it is great to see dollars get towards this office, but now those dollars have to get out to the community. So colleagues, please hold this office accountable over the coming years. JBC, please put a microscope on them and make sure that these dollars are getting out the door. They have 15 million with this bill. They have 9 million on severance tax. I believe they have 5 million from the general fund. These are good, important, worthy dollars to be spent on a variety of important topics that are coming from the communities to help these transitional communities survive and be the wonderful places they are as their main economy falters. But please hold them accountable in the years to come to make sure those dollars are being spent in worthy and noble ways to help these wonderful towns exist for generations.
Senator Wilbert. Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So it's sitting on the floor here with the good Republican member from the Joint Budget Committee, Senate member from the Joint Budget Committee, totaling up the total dollars amount that have gone to this program, this Just Transitions effort. And we on the back of the napkin right there, God, it would have been nice if we'd been out to lunch and actually had a napkin to write on, but we just added up in our heads, I'd say about $35 million. So this is a derivative effort by government to resolve a matter that we chose as policy to be the primary policy of the state. I want to call out something that is, we just run right past it on a day after day after day basis right now. Climate policy is not free. Now, we have all these aspirations, we have all these hopes, we have all these concerns, but we must always pay attention to the fact that climate policy is not free. There are direct hard dollar costs, there are disruption costs, there are many things that happen because of the policy choices, specifically around climate, that we take. And we need to be aware of that. This is one example. 1394 is a response to climate policy actions that we've taken in the past. It's $35 million that we're trying to figure out, are we doing it right, are we not doing it right? But it's on us to be the custodians of the taxpayers' dollars in response to the fact that we are disrupting a lot of people's lives, and so we're throwing money at it. You could call it guilt money, you could call it any number of things, but the reality is it's incredibly important that we do this well. The assumption, as we're all standing here a little bit worn, but still aspiring that our state would be the best it could possibly be, we all hope it's going to be just fine. It's going to be fine. But the reality is when we create these sorts of new things, didn't do it before, now we're going to create it. A lot of people, you know how it works. You get people in a room, in their best moments, their confusion, in their worst moments, their chaos. We have to be really attentive to the fact that we are now throwing money at something and it must be done well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm clearly just rising to say I have some concerns that we do 1394 perhaps a little better than we might be doing it at this point.
Senator Wilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking back to some notes as we put this program in place, the Just Transition Office. And as I was looking for my notes from a couple of years ago, I remember standing in the same well saying, you know, we're creating this brand new bureaucracy and telling folks out in Western Colorado how much we care that we've just destroyed your economy. And yet at the same time, we did not much more than put one person in place and, you know, kind of hoped for the best, kind of well wishes, but didn't actually put any money behind it. I will be a yes on this bill today because we're finally putting some money behind that. But I think the Center for Monument made it clear that the reason we're forced to spend money to support those folks is because of some policy issues, policy decisions that we made. The other thing that I found as I was looking back through my notes from a couple of years ago is how my staff at the time was joking at the creepy name that we had given this policy, the Just Transition Policy, as if that's somehow going to make things just. When in fact, I mean, so some of the ideas that they had at the time that I thought perhaps were a little more appropriate. One is a committee that says, we killed your industry, sabotaged your economy, so now we want to create a department to show how much we care. Another suggestion from way back then was the Office of Career Forced Migration, the Office of Unpredictable Energy Reliance. So, you know, I think in the end, I think that we're finally funding some of the mistakes we've made in the past, and ultimately I'll be a yes vote to this. I'm anxious to hear some of the good things that are going on the ground, and I hope that the bill sponsors or others might be able to give us an idea some of the positives that they've seen on the ground, and is there some bright spots ahead of us?
Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd love to talk about Craig, Colorado in this space, but it's not just Craig. There's a big power plant in Hayden and a 20-mile coal mine there in Craig, and some of you have been with me there. The coal mine's up on the hill. They bring coal right down the hill to the power station. We've already closed in power plants in Nucla and Natarita. We're wonderful little communities. These are great places to live, believe it or not. This is not West Virginia coal mining. These are fine little towns. So the transition is interesting, looks a little different. But I thought I might just tell you, so what I think this looks like is local communities need their own plan. The last thing these people want is the government to come train them for their next job. They just want to know either what's happening to my town or when should I move to Wyoming. So in Craig, about 2 years ago, and I take credit for helping them a little bit, we put together a plan. And we actually hired an economic development director, half paid by DOLA and half paid by the Alpomar Foundation. And these were local actions, local people, local control. So I just want to run through a couple of what some of those programs are, because we had 8 programs and they're all fun. There's a really nice little community college campus there, tons of potential new programs. In the basement is Walter. Walter is all the bones for a dinosaur. That doesn't exist many places. So we're working with the Museum of Natural History to put a dinosaur museum in Craig, so that folks who go to the dinosaur monument can come through there and stop. Big news on regional workforce housing and transit. We're talking to Union Pacific about the train track that runs over to 40 miles away to Steamboat for commuter traffic in the industry, in the ski industry. We're actually building 2 big solar farms there. Outdoor recreation, got several grants from the state to help build recreational opportunities. There's a small business innovation center sponsored by OEDIT. We have a major project going on with University of Wyoming in Utah on using coal for other than burning things like making coal fiber. So these kinds of things are community driven. It's their idea. So what these funds do is help seed the programs that the community already knows about and already wants to do. So, when we talk about the Just Transitions Office, the Office of Economic Development, or the 100 other programs that will be available to these folks, like the clinic or whatever, what we're talking about is fueling their ideas. That's really important as we talk about all this, and I believe these programs are doing that. However, we still have the problem. Say 60% of the tax base, of the local property tax base, which the state should not set the assessment rate for, 60% of that came from coal and electrical generation. So we're also struggling to rebuild the tax base. And that's why we need atomic energy generation in Craig, Colorado.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the good senator from Vail's challenge of keeping up. I actually was trying to text. So one of my prior professional experiences was managing a coal mine in Texas. Every coal mine I worked at in Texas is now closed. Ironically shut down because of cheap, affordable natural gas. And one of my colleagues in Texas now is a senior executive at one of the coal mine in Craig at Trapper. So I texted him to ask him if the just transition was being, was it fruitful? Was it paying dividends? But I didn't get a text back from him yet, but I just wanted to offer up the response to the good senator from Vail. I'll stay right on top of it, Senator, and make sure we get some good progress.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to follow up, and this is a sincere question. I was listening to your presentation about some of the things that are happening that's positive, and one of the forward-looking elements that I want to understand is we've got this enormous infrastructure investment in power lines coming in out of those power plants, and I would honestly like to hear what your perspective, and you can keep it to 30 seconds or so, but I do think it aligns with the bill. I think it's an honest conversation that fits under this bill. We're talking about spending money. What could we do with those power lines and potential additional cleaner energy sources?
Senator Rankin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the projects that I mentioned is solar farms, and there are 2 big solar farms being installed there. They're a fraction of the 300 megawatts that the power plant produces in Craig. So that's one use of it. It makes sense to start there with energy generation. What other states are doing in other countries is when you replace coal, finding another source. There's 2 really good possible sources. One is natural gas powered, so you essentially just replace coal with natural gas. You reduce the carbon by 50%, round numbers, by doing that. The other alternative that's being widely investigated is, in fact, small modular nuclear reactors. If you recall, we had a bill that ran early in the year and it was defeated. I think we're going to do that study locally anyway. So if you think about a grid and the cost of putting in a new distribution line is astronomical these days because of all the, there's one that's coming down through Moffett County from a wind source in Wyoming. It's taken about, ever since I've been here, 10 years to get that approved. So you've already got those lines in place, and so it makes sense to build nuclear power generation or some sort of power generation at that source so you can tap into those same lines. The alternative that you'll hear about is to build a lot more transmission lines so that we can ship solar and wind power around when the sun shines and the wind blows. So the trade-off is between using those existing transmission lines and building a lot of new lines to more flexibly share power in a regional transmission organization.
Senator Lundeen.
And fair enough. I've made my comments about the fact that climate policy is not free policy, but I wanted to talk to that. It seems to me that the big costs, or in a couple of the big costs, aside from just the financial cost, is you've got the cost of time because you have to get easements for all these power lines to move through and so forth, and that just is a big legal problem or legal challenge to get through that. And the other piece of the puzzle is you've got environmental challenges because you're cutting through forest, you're cutting through whatever in these new easements to put in those power lines. So I guess I'm just tying off the value as we're thinking about 1194 or 1394 and just transitions about actually doing work with regard to the infrastructure that is already legally in place, paid for, and could be supported with other clean energy sources.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of 1394. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1394 is adopted. Will the clerk please read Majority Leader Moreno?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1400 lay over to the end of the calendar.
The motion is the motion is to lay over House Bill 1400 to the end of the calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1400 will be laid over to the end of the calendar. Clerk, please read the title of House Bill 1233.
House Bill 1233, Representatives Lantina and Soper, Senators Simpson and Janal, concerning the continuation of the regulation of optometry by the State Board of Optometry and in connection therewith implementing the recommendations in the 2021 Sunset Report by the Department of Regulatory Agencies.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1233.
To the bill, Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the regulation of the State Board of Optometry, and it is up for another 11 years and will not sunset again until 2033. DORA recommendations were to allow optometrists to practice according to their qualifications as determined by the State Board and the National Board exams. Optometrists are 4-year doctoral degrees, and they have live patient training and post-grad clinic residency programs. They are not MDs, they are ODs, but they are doctoral degree trained. Doctors of optometry provide primary care health care beyond prescribing glasses and contact lenses. A comprehensive eye exam provided by an optometrist includes diagnosis and management of eye diseases and evaluations for systemic diseases, including diabetes and high blood pressure. ODs, which are optometrists, prescribe medications to treat eye diseases such as glaucoma, also pre- and post-operative surgical care. DORA recommends expanding their practice, which they are trained to do. There were no regulatory actions taken against 14 states that have expanded scope of practice as we are doing. All 24 schools of optometry across the country teach these procedures specific to lasers: capsulotomy, laser peripheral iridotomy, and laser trabeculoplasty. ODs are doctoral degrees, and they pass an approved national exam, complete specified training, and retraining on clinical procedures requiring something by an mentoring by an ophthalmologist with real living patients. I ask for your support and your yes vote on the regulation of the optometrists for another 11 years.
Senator Simpson. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of 1233. All those, Senator Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I appreciate the good work that my colleagues have done, Senator Simpson and Senator Janal. Just want to give you a little perspective. I don't know if any of you have had the type of eye surgery that I have had from an ophthalmologist. I was not fortunate throughout my life that I was blessed with the keen eyesight that some of you may have been blessed with, but off and on throughout my life I have had gone from glasses to contacts to a number of years ago when I was in the house. I was having significant eye problems. Some of you that might have been in the house with me may recall this, but it got to be to the point where I could hardly see. And I was able to make it down to Colorado Springs, and I had I'll say a good working relationship with an optometrist who I know very well, good people, but they could not handle the problem. Turns out I had a detached retina. When I say detached, it was not detached in one place, or two, or three places, or four places, but it was indeed detached in 5 places. And I was very fortunate that, quite frankly, had I not seen the ophthalmologist when I saw them that weekend, I probably would have lost my eyesight in at least one eye. And so I speak from some experience that, as good as the optometrists are, and like I say, I have very good friends who are optometrists. I appreciate the great work that they did do and they still do today. There is a big difference between optometrists and ophthalmologists. And in no way am I impugning at all the good doctors who are doctors of optometry, because I've used their services and would probably continue to do so today. But the type of surgery that I had was very extensive. In fact, it was so extensive that I had to be put under with anesthesia, because it's not the type of surgery that that is done, is being potentially proposed. It was very extensive. They had to use specific types of lasers. They had to put literally a buckle around my eye. They had to drain the vitreous fluid from my eye and put a gas bubble in my eye. And the healing process, as some of you may know, if you have a detached retina. By the way, there is no pain with a detached retina. I did not realize that I was losing my eyesight every single day. In fact, I remember that I would go out, I would see flashes of light, and I would go out on my balcony and thinking that there was a thunderstorm going on, and there was nothing going on. And I had no idea what was happening, except that the retina inside my eye was literally coming down like a set of curtains. So I had this surgery that was very extensive, and it took the better part of 2 weeks before I could even sit up straight. And this was during the legislative session. I think my good colleague, Senator Gardner, who was in the House with me, will remember that. I couldn't drive. I couldn't drive over. I couldn't drive myself. I couldn't drive over 7,000 feet, and yet my services were needed in the House. So someone had to come and pick me up. We drove clear out to eastern Colorado and came in the long way around to Denver. And I had touch-up surgery, once again, follow-up surgery that very morning. As I called it in layman's terms, I went in to see the surgeon, and he did spot welding on my eye, which was a whole nother procedure. But anyways, I tell you this story because to this very day, I am very indebted to the ophthalmologist and the ophthalmologists that I know who perform, they are medical doctors who perform very, very sophisticated eye surgery that the good optometrists are not able to perform. In fact, one of my ophthalmological friends down in Colorado Springs invited me a couple, 3 years ago to watch him do surgery. And I spent the entire morning watching this highly trained, he's not only an ophthalmologist, but he's a PhD in Colorado Springs, watch him do various types of eye surgery. I was literally standing in the operating room and watched this very sophisticated eye surgery that went on. And so I have the utmost respect for the highly trained ophthalmologists who have gone to school, medical school, postgraduate technical medical school to be an ophthalmologist that the good optometrists do not do. As good as the optometrists are, they are not trained to do the very specialized types of surgery that was done on me or that is done for the very fortunate people that need the very delicate surgeons that the ophthalmologists do for those of us who may need it. So I tell you that not to try and sway your vote one way or the other, but I have, once again, the highest, utmost respect for my good friends who are optometrists, but especially the ophthalmologists who have this highly sophisticated training that someday some of you will ultimately need, and you will be glad that you are seeing an ophthalmologist. So with that, I just wanted to relay that story, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Thank you.
Motion is the adoption of 1233. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes having 1233 is adopted. Will clerk please read the title of 1314?
House Bill 1314, Representatives Ricks and Hooten, Senators Gonzalez and Sonnenberg, concerning the rights of a person with ownership interest in a vehicle that has been towed from private property without the person's consent and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move I move House Bill 1314 on second reading along with the Finance and Appropriations Committee report.
To the Finance Committee report, Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because we are so interested in ensuring that we are listening to all of the stakeholders. During the Finance Committee report, we heard countless stories from people who have been unjustly towed and still made amendments to improve and strengthen this policy. We ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Finance Committee report is adopted. Appropriations Committee report, Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Appropriations Committee, we appropriately appropriated the appropriate funds. We ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Sonnenberg. Oh, there's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read L48?
Amendment L048.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L048.
To the amendment.
What this amendment does is basically the compromise that was negotiated between the tow truck drivers and, and us and others as well. It allows them to keep a little bit of the money so that disadvantaged still have skin in the game to get their car. I would ask for your aye vote on this amendment.
Motion is the adoption of L48. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. L48 is adopted. Motion is the adoption of House Bill 1314. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 13. Is
that on the amendment or on the bill?
On the bill. We just moved the bill. I was taking a vote. All right. Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I just wanted to let folks know, particularly those that are potentially outside the chamber that were concerned about this bill, is I want to certainly commend the sponsors for taking time off. It's the last week of session. Everybody's got a lot of stuff going on, but I really appreciate the sponsors taking meetings, in-person meetings here these last few days, sit down, go through our concerns sort of line by line. So I still, sure, I have some questions about the necessity of the bill in general, but for any of us who have ever had vehicles towed and gone through that process, I think we would all agree this is potentially an industry that needs some work, right, to be improved upon. So the particular concerns that I had were addressed by the sponsors, and I want to thank them for that publicly, because again, it's a busy time. This bill was very, very far down the road already. So the bill, I think, is in a much, much better place, and I just wanted to take a minute, I appreciate it, Mr. Chair, to commend the sponsors on that for really proving to be statesmen, statespeople, stateswomen through this, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you, appreciate it very much.
Motion is the adoption of 1314. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 1314 is adopted. Will clerk please read the title of House Bill 1011?
House Bill 1011, Representatives Cutter and Snyder, Senators Story and Lee, concerning the establishment of a state grant program that provides funding to local governments that dedicate resources for wildfire mitigation purposes.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1011 and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Lee.
The Appropriations Committee met this morning and adopted the appropriation clause extending the period for which the $10 million transfer in the bill may be expended. Ask for a aye vote on the Appropriations Committee report.
Motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1011. The bill came out of the Wildfire Matters Committee this summer. It's a mitigation incentive program to help local communities. The Appropriations Committee, which is a committee reference, voted it out one short of unanimous, and it basically provides money to the local counties if they have a dedicated funding source for mitigation efforts. I ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of 1011. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 1011 is adopted. Clerk, please read the title of House Bill 1012.
House Bill 1012, Representatives Cutter and Valdez, Senators Janal and Lee, concerning healthy forests and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1012 and the appropriations report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The appropriations gave $3 million of one-time general fund money to the Healthy Forest and Vibrant Communities Fund, $2.2 million to the Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation Grant Program, and lastly, it moved $2 million to COSWAP, the Colorado State Wildfire Action Plan. And I ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill also came out of the Wildfire Matters Committee this summer and received significant support. It basically is a Healthy Forest Initiative program to bring Colorado into the 21st century in the managing forests, to set up a, let me get the term right here, a carbon co-benefit framework and a carbon accounting framework, basically to help local communities that are managing their forests identify how to properly manage the forest for carbon sequestration.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the bill does help also to remove debris, to restore damaged lands, forests after a fire, reseeding and planting trees in the areas that are critical. It really looks at post-fire recovery as well. And I ask for an aye vote.
Motion for the adoption of House Bill 1012. All those in favor say Senator Hansen. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L 10?
Amendment L010.
Hansen.
Senator Hansen.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move L10 to House Bill 1012.
To the amendment, Senator Hansen.
Thank you. Colleagues, this is a very important amendment and I think fits very nicely into House Bill 1012. This is very focused on creating a process, an inclusive process, to create minimum statewide codes around decreasing fire danger around the state. Increased resiliency for our homes, our structures, better vegetation management, all of which we know can pay huge dividends for Colorado as we face the climate crisis, as we face a huge increase in the amount of wildfire risk that we have around the state. If you'll notice from the Appropriations Committee report that we just adopted, that we evaluated this morning in the committee, we added $7 million more to this bill to do important mitigation work in the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface. And this, I think, is a perfect nexus to what we're trying to do with codes. Because one of the big problems we've had over the last several years is that we have missed out on what is estimated to be about $102 million of federal grants because we are one of 8 states, let me repeat that, one of 8 states that doesn't have any minimum mitigation codes to reduce wildfire risk and fire risk. Colorado is missing out, and we know the size and scope of this problem. We need federal help. We need state help. We need locals to step up and do their part. And that's really what L10 is all about, is really trying to focus in on that local piece. And as we build new structures, put ourselves in a much more resilient place. And this is not just some kind of hypothetical. We have very clear evidence from other states that have done this that they see significant savings. And those savings show up in a few different ways. One, the buildings themselves are less likely to be damaged. In fact, 43% less property loss in the econometric studies that I've looked at. Happy to share that with anybody that would like. It's National Bureau of Economic Research paper. So it's led to billions of dollars of savings from the wildfires that we saw last year in California because they adopted these types of codes in 2008, and now we've got enough data to compare before and after. That's what's so powerful about this change. As we set this in motion with this amendment, we are going to see significant savings for the state of Colorado, and it shows up in lower insurance rates. And so if you build a home to a higher resiliency standard, with mitigation in mind from the moment you break ground, you actually are saving money because your insurance costs are decreased. And so yes, there might be some additional upfront costs, but those are quickly paid back because your homeowner's insurance goes down. So huge amount of savings available here. We've developed this after months of stakeholding. In fact, there was a 22-to-1 vote by the task force of county commissioners and Mike Morgan, who everyone I'm sure has met from the Department of Public Safety, leading that effort. So this amendment really comes out of a very long stakeholder process, widely accepted, as I said, 22-to-1 vote in that committee to accept these recommendations. And I think this will put Colorado in a much better place. We are allocating huge amounts of the state budget to fight fire. And I think it's time that all levels of government do their part. And that's why I think it's so urgent that we adopt L010.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that's all wonderful. That's just great. Go get a bill title to do those things. Ask for a title ruling, Mr. Chair.
Title ruling has been requested. We will take a senatorial 5. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will reserve the opportunity to come back later and ask for it, but for now I withdraw my request for a title ruling.
Title ruling has been withdrawn. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1012 to the end of the calendar.
The motion is to lay over House Bill 1012 to the end of the calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1012 has been laid over to the end of the calendar. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1051?
House Bill 1051, Representatives Byrd, McKean, Senators Zenzinger, and Heisey, concerning modification of the Colorado Affordable Housing Tax Credit in a connection therewith, extending the time during which the credit may be claimed and increasing the yearly amount of credits that can be allocated.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1051, and I move to reject the Finance Committee report.
All right, the motion is to reject the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, the Finance Committee report has been rejected. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this is the Affordable Housing Tax Credit. All it does is extend the time during which the credit may be claimed. Thank you.
Senator Heisey. The motion is the adoption of 1051. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 1051 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of 1151?
House Bill 1151, Representatives Catlin and Roberts, Senators Bridges and Simpson, concerning measures to incentivize waterways landscapes and in connection therewith, creating a state program to finance the voluntary replacement of irrigated turf and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1151 in the Appropriations Report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Simpson.
I assume it was appropriately appropriated the appropriations.
The motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a bill about turf replacement, an opportunity to expand some existing programs in the state whereby CWCB will now partner with municipalities and other public entities around encouraging and incentivizing cost sharing with folks to replace really water intensive turf, bluegrass, and replace it with native vegetative cover. It's really it's just trying times right now. If you're paying attention to the water level in Lake Powell, it's like at record lows since it started filling it. There are even articles I read this week about finding human remains in 55-gallon drums at the bottom of the lake. And this is actually, this is going to get worse likely before it gets much better. We just really need to focus on this vital natural resource. And I've spoken before about my motivation to be here. A lot of it stems around this pressing issue around water. And particularly in this one, again, it's an opportunity for me to come up and talk a little bit about the pressures in my community where folks in a Front Range county are interested in drying up tens of thousands of irrigated acres in my community and are attempting to market that water to a Front Range interest, which is rather problematic for me and my community. So this is a $2 million investment, one-time investment, and looking again for CWCB to partner with public entities and then try to help some of those other entities that don't already have this kind of turf buyback program and help them get it started and established. It's a good opportunity to help with the water situation in the state.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am so grateful to be running this bill with someone who understands water as well as he does and who really sees the impact on his community of what happens when we have all sorts of water waste here on the Front Range. And certainly growing up here, I remember the circle, triangle, square watering days when we were in droughts. And you know what? How about we just have less to water? That's what this bill says. This bill says that no one has a picnic on the median on a highway. No one has a picnic on the little strip of grass at a strip mall where they're having a tree party out there. It's no benefit to anyone, but it is a cost to other people in our state where that water is coming from. This is an investment in making that change. This is an investment in the places where that water is coming from to make sure that we aren't taking more than we need here on the Front Range, and that we are being responsible with the water that we have so that we can make sure that we don't dry up the San Luis Valley, that we maintain the Sand Dunes National Park. I mean, the water goes out of there. There's no way my understanding is that there's a likelihood that that park goes away. So I would ask for a yes vote on this investment in preserving Colorado water.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That reminded me of kind of what we're doing and the reality in my community, what we faced really in the 70s, a recognition that we're out of water. We don't have any more water to spare. So we crafted a program. It's a recognition that there is no unappropriated water left in our aquifer system. So it says you can't get an appropriation. You don't get a new use of water until you retire a like amount of water. And this is along those lines a little bit. It says we're going to focus on trying to reduce that water footprint. I'd be interested in the balance of my time here in the legislature, though, talking about and pushing forward that concept of there isn't enough water left. So, development going forward, I would challenge folks to do much like we have and said there isn't any water left. So if you're going to craft a new development before you issue a tap, you got to go find and retire a like amount of water, or at least reduce the consumptive use to equal what you're about to tap into, your new source, and try to come into balance, because we've had that recognition really since the 70s. So appreciate yes vote on 1151.
Motion's the adoption of 1151. All those in favor? Senator Donovan.
I do have my amendment.
Oh, man. Oh.
Hi, colleagues. I can tell by the chagrin of the chair that he wasn't looking for additional commentary, but we've done so many good water bills on consent calendar that I actually haven't had the chance to rise and do my semi-regular reminder to the body of water in Colorado concerns. This bill is fine. It is fine. We're going to spend $2 million, and we're going to get some people to get rid of grass that would have never been put in the first place, probably. It's fine. Is it going to fix any of the water problems we have? Nope. No. Because let me tell you where we are right now in terms of the water situation in Colorado, and what $2 million to change grass to not grass feels a little like a misstep, or something we probably should have done 20 years ago. Or perhaps maybe we should have passed other bills carried bipartisanly in this chamber that got killed, even in my span, that required new communities to show where their water was coming from. Just a few days ago, Lake Powell reached that critical moment where I've been warning you guys about, where it was so low, we are falling below the level of being able to create power for the 7 western United States. We had to release 500,000 acre-feet from Flaming Gorge just to be able to make power. We're not even talking anymore about ag, or flushing your toilets, or having your fountain on, or watering your lawn. We are now at that critical moment in Lake Powell that no one thought would ever come. And it was always this kind of hypothetical line on a graph that there was no way that we would ever have to consider the fact that Lake Powell wouldn't have enough water to make power. So that's seven western states threatened without having power. We're in the driest period in 2 decades, and we are talking about getting rid of triangles of grass. Lake Mead is at the lowest level it's ever been. Lake Mead, if you don't know, is right below Lake Powell. They work in cooperation with each other, these 2 artificial bathtubs in the middle of the desert. That's water for 25 million people. And that's the lowest it's ever been. So I was going to run an amendment that was a little bit of a joke. The amendment read, any turf replacement must have an equal reduction in Trans Mountain diversions. But the more I thought about it, it probably isn't something to joke about. This bill will have zero impact on how my ranches run, how much water is in my creeks. When the compact calls what that feels like for the Western Slope, this has zero impact on it. But I really hope that we all feel good about getting rid of some grass.
Motion, Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, when people run amendments for $1 or $2 million programs to help address our teacher shortage, yeah, it's not enough, but I don't hear anyone coming down saying zero impact. The truth is we have to do everything we can. There are 2 states in the country that have no inflowing rivers and only outflowing rivers. It's Hawaii, for obvious reasons, and Colorado. The water we use here is Colorado water. The water that we won't use because we've replaced Kentucky bluegrass with native species is water that is Colorado water. We are preserving and saving Colorado water. Will this solve everything when it comes to water? No, absolutely not. Will this be a piece of that solution? I think it will be. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the good senator from Vail. I so appreciate the challenges of the first time your water rights under curtailment for meeting compact compliance on the Colorado River. The water rights I own have been in curtailment since 1900. So it's a reality of the world that I live in, and I remind people to watch what happens in the Rio Grande Basin in particular, because about a decade or 2 behind us is what's happening on the Colorado River system right now. And this is as much about trying to get folks engaged in the message about how important this is going to be going forward, that it truly is going to be one of the most impactful outcomes and situations that we have to deal with in the next 20 years. If the next 20 years look like the last 20 years, this becomes hugely problematic for us if climate conditions don't change. So it's a small, very small, incremental, tiny step to help raise awareness and get folks engaged.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to wrap up, if this contributes to culture change where we don't put in Kentucky bluegrass to start with, if this helps raise awareness of why we shouldn't have Kentucky bluegrass and more people take that out, that is a win for this bill. That is a win for Colorado. I ask for an aye vote.
Motion's the adoption of 1151. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1151 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of 1240?
House Bill 1240, Representatives Froelich and Young, Senators Field and Simpson, concerning enhancing mandatory reporting for people required to report child abuse and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We move House Bill 1240.
That's a proper motion. That's a proper motion. Any discussion?
I wasn't finished.
Senator Fields. Senator Fields.
Go ahead.
No, go.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead, Senator. You're forcing me to do it? Okay, I'll start all over again. Mr. Chair, I move House Bill 1240 on second reading and ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. The motion is the adoption of House Bill 1240. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. 1240 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1281?
House Bill 1281, Representatives Gonzalez, Gutierrez, and Ricks, Senators Winter and Rankin, concerning a program to fund behavioral health care services and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you. I move for the passage of House Bill 1281, and I also move Amendment L015.
And the Appropriations Committee report?
And the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Winter.
You should do that.
The Appropriations
Senator Rankin.
report appropriated the appropriate amount of dollars, which is quite a bit.
The motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. There's an amendment of the desk. Will the clerk please read L15?
Amendment L015 by Senator
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L015.
To the amendment, Senator Winter.
This added some language to make sure that we are addressing both behavioral health and substance use disorders. It made a definition, and it made some language change around services for underserved populations.
Senator Rankin.
And the amendment also asks the Behavioral Health Administration to actually provide technical assistance to folks who have to write the grants. I mean, I think we all understand that there's a limitation on people to write grants, manage the money, absorb all this money we're going to flow out. So we put something in here that requires the administration to actually help them do that.
Motion is the adoption of L15. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. L15 is adopted. To the bill, Senator Rankin.
So 1281 is actually recommendation E, right out of the Behavioral Health Administration Implementation Plan, the plan that I'm sure you've all read in great detail. So this is the implementation. It's actually $90 million. So it's a big, important program that sets up the grant structure to implement that plan.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this grant structure really centers the unique needs of different communities across Colorado. We know one size doesn't fit all, so this makes sure to take in the needs of rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas, and what they specifically need to close the gap in services.
Motion is the adoption of 1281. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1281 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of 1302?
House Bill 1302, Representatives Kennedy and Will, Senators Huckabee, Lewis, and Priola, concerning healthcare practice transformation to support whole person health through integrated care models and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1302 and the Health and Human Services Committee report.
And appropriations?
And appropriations.
And appropriations.
To the Health and Human Services Committee report, Senator Hawkins Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had 3 amendments in HHS. The first one dealt with the Colorado family physicians to help them with their payment systems. The second one was from the Colorado Psychiatric Society and aligns the bill with evidence-based models. And the third, most dramatic amendment changed the word case to care.
The motion is the adoption of the Health and Human Services Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Health and Human Services Committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members in appropriations, they appropriated money, and they also added some language concerning 4 clients attempting to receive long-term care. Ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of the Senator Kirkmeyer. Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Great. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, as it's already talked about, creates primary care and behavioral health statewide integration grant program, but it's created in the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance. And as you read through, even in the summary of the legislation, it talks about how healthcare policy and finance is required to develop a universal contract with the behavioral health services in collaboration with the BHA, so the Behavioral Health Administration, the new division or department or whatever we're trying to call it without it being a department. The bill we just passed the other day, not today. Oh no, sorry, I thought we were on the bill. Okay, I'll wait.
The motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report.
Sure goes so fast. I thought I
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. Senator Kirkmeyer.
Now I just want to thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. What a difference 30 seconds makes. Anyways, let me just start over then, and I'll talk slower. So, as noted, this bill creates primary care and behavioral health statewide integration grant program, but they're creating it in the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, instead of in the new administration division. You know, we're not trying to call it a department because the Constitution doesn't allow us to have another department. Behavioral Health Administration division model, whatever that is. And so I'm wondering why this is being created here when, as you go through and you read the summary of the legislation, it talks about how healthcare policy and finance is supposed to be in collaboration with the Behavioral Health Administration.
and the Department of Human Services and the Division of Insurance in the Department of Regulatory Affairs. It would seem to me it'd be more appropriate if we were really looking at more at the Behavioral Health Administration to be carrying this and having this grant program so that they could carry out what we desire them to do. I mean, this bill is proposing to spend almost $35 million, and it's provided to the state through the ARPA money to support yet another grant program. I mean, has anybody ever just like sat down and figured out where all this money is going to? I know at one point last year we were talking about $450 million of ARPA funds going to behavioral health. You would think at some point we'd have a plan about where we're sending grants, what the grants, each grant is supposed to do, and how we're actually going to get something accomplished in this state. Because here we are again, proposing to spend almost $35 million provided to the state through the ARPA funds to support yet another grant program in the behavioral health space. You know, there is supposed to be this goal of integrating behavioral health and physical health, but it's difficult, it's extremely difficult to see how spending more than $30 million will achieve that goal, because we really don't have very much information. And we're not really looking at what is healthcare policy and finance doing in the behavioral health world, what is the Department of Human Services doing, what it will be doing in the new Behavioral Health Administration, and even just the bill that was passed this morning with regard to fentanyl. Another $44 million, much of it, 80 to 85% of it, going to education, training, and treatment, and it has to do with behavioral health, and it's over in the Department of the Environmental Health, the Department of Health. So it's like we've got this kind of fragmentation going of all the funds that we have going out, and there's nobody really looking at how are we ensuring that we aren't having overlap, that we aren't having duplication, or that we just, quite frankly, aren't wasting a bunch of money. So much of the work to be done to achieve this integration of behavioral health care consists of rethinking archaic processes and models of care delivery that very likely necessitate reorganization and rededication of resources, not bigger organizations and new resources, as this bill seems to imply through its appropriation. I would ask for a no vote on this bill.
Senator Hawkins Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is going to be one of the most transformative best practices for physician practices around the country. The reason why it's in HCPF is because it's based on a pilot that CMS funded back in 2013. And so it's the Centers for Medicare Medicaid. That's why we're putting this under HCPF. This will help every one of your rural healthcare clinics, because this will help give them the resources to do telehealth, to get behavioral health providers connected with patients. You have a patient, let's say you have a mom that just had a baby. She goes into her doctor because she has an infection or something is happening to her. She mentions that she is depressed or not feeling well, that the clinic will immediately connect her with a behavioral health therapist, not give her a piece of paper and say, call this number. They will help them right then. That's why this bill is called the Whole Person Care Bill. This is one of the best bills that we will pass this session when it comes to best practices for medical care. And every penny will be documented because HCPF is doing it based on 3 different levels of care. So this, colleagues, really should be a unanimous vote. It's a one-time funding bill to improve whole person care with physical care and mental care.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Man, how many times have we heard every single grant program that we're doing is transformative? This bill is in the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance to create primary care and behavioral health statewide integration grant program with resources dedicated to evaluating clinical integration care models. We talk about resources to health clinics, I just don't see it. And I think that if you went out and talked to those health clinics, they would tell you that the situations that they've had over the past few years, since you all redid doing Medicaid and we created RAISE and all sorts of things across the state, that they've been having problems getting resources actually to the citizens and to the people who need them. So again, this bill, $35 million approximately, going to yet another department to talk about behavioral health, that's going to be transformative because, my God, we have to use that word every time we create a new program. A new program for $35 million and 5 FTE. This is just about growing government. They're going to put together a task force. They're going to sit around for a while. They're not going to get the money to citizens, to the people who need it, to provide the services that are actually needed. And it's just going to be a waste. One more waste. So I would urge a no vote on 22-1302.
Motion is the adoption of 1302. All those, Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And colleagues, this was a bill that we did here in committee. I was a no vote in committee for, I mean, perhaps not as passionate of reasons as you've heard from my colleagues, but I too have a hard time connecting the price tag with the benefits. Like, I think the bill sponsors make a good argument that whole person health is important. It is, and by passing things like the Behavioral Health Administration, I think we've proven as a state, and I will not bore you with the stories of a bygone era where things like preventive care coverage and maternity coverage and mental health care coverage and behavioral health care coverage was a pipe dream, right? I won't bore you with how far we've come. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we are talking about $35 million. 35 million precious taxpayer dollars, and whether you want to argue that they're federal taxpayer dollars or state taxpayer dollars, they're still taxpayer dollars, right? And 35 million of them, many of you have come to the well and argued passionately about conserving a lot smaller dollar figures than this. So when we talk about what is this going to do, how is this, and the Senator from Weld County, I think, made a good point. When we talk about what is this actually going to mean for the patient, and what could $35 million mean to the patient? Colleagues, $35 million to the patients in this state could make an enormous dent in things like the family glitch. An enormous dent for premium payers. $35 million, and you look at what reinsurance did and how much that price tag is, and the direct benefits that the proponents would say that our citizens saw. I would love to hear somebody come to the well and say, for $35 million, this is what the, hate to use the term average Colorado citizen, right? Because there's no such thing as an average Colorado citizen. But for most, certainly many of us, what are we going to see in benefits for spending 35 million taxpayer dollars? I am worried that some elements of what you heard from the senator from Weld County might be true. That we're going to take 35 million taxpayer dollars and end up with task forces and research papers and ideas and concepts that don't necessarily translate to the well-being of our citizens. And I would ask you to contrast that with things like the senator from Westminster sponsoring a bill that is building behavioral health beds, constructing them across the state. Okay? Compare and contrast that. A direct and immediate benefit to citizens across our state versus something that to me seems candidly a little bit nebulous. we're going to create this statewide integration grant program in order to work on evidence-based clinical integration care models. I've been in this industry for 30 years, and even I find this a little bit ambiguous. If this was something where we were taking $250,000 or $500,000 and creating another blue ribbon commission or study group, I could see getting behind it. But for me to move from a no vote to a yes vote, somebody's going to need to make a whole lot more compelling of an argument than, trust us, this $35 million that we spend is going to, even in the future, result in meaningful improvements in care for our citizens. And I might argue with a lot of you when we spend huge amounts of money on some of these topics, but at least you can come to the well and say, no, this is what you're going to see. This is what you're going to see tomorrow. These are the benefits that our citizens are going to experience. I have a really, really hard time with this. I know we're getting a lot of money from the federal government, and we might not need to be careful anymore with dollars, but 35 million. Think of the bills that you've ran, asking for $1 million here, or $3 million there, or $5 million this year, and think of the pushback that we are getting when we try to spend $1, $3, or $5 million. This is 35 million, colleagues. I think there's a better use of funds here. I listened to this intently as I could in committee, and I still don't see it, would still encourage a no vote on House Bill 1302.
Motion to the adoption of 1302. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1302 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of 1303?
House Bill 1303, Representatives Amabile and Sandridge, Senators Winter and Smallwood, concerning an increase in the number of residential behavioral health beds and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move 1303 in the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Winter.
In appropriations, they allocated the correct amount of money.
Motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Smallwood. Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This creates a badly needed increase in beds that we have for people in recovery. It's 16 beds at Fort Logan Mental Health Hospital and 125 transitional beds. This is a lot of beds, and it still does not meet our need, but is an important step forward.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. You heard me here at the, well, first of all, I want to thank the prime sponsor on this bill as well for the hard work that she's done, her advocacy in this area. You probably remember me standing here not very long ago talking about the need for us to consider alternative modes of transportation for a mental health care crisis. And that would be a good use of taxpayer funds. And if you talk to law enforcement and pay attention to their concerns around, okay, now we're making steps towards advancing safer, alternative, more affordable modes of transportation for folks, but ask them about those waiting for restoration, competency. This is a huge step forward in these areas. It's why I enthusiastically support the bill and ask for your aye vote.
The motion is the adoption of 1303. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1303 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1308?
House Bill 1308, Representative McCormick, Senator Donovan, concerning the creation of the Colorado Agricultural Workforce Services Program in the Department of Agriculture to provide resources specific to agricultural employment and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you. I move House Bill 1308 in the Appropriations report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Donovan.
Be appropriated.
Motion is adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. And the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Donovan. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is adoption of 1308. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1308 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that House Bill 1358 lay over 3 bills. Only 3? Only 3.
The motion is to lay over House Bill 1308 3 bills. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1308 will lay over to 3 bills. 1358. That was 1358. All right. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1367?
House Bill 1367, Representatives Lantin and Gray, Senators Winter and Pedersen, concerning modifications to laws prohibiting discrimination in employment practices and in connection therewith, repealing the exclusion of domestic workers from the definition of employee, extending the time limit for filing a charge alleging unfair or discriminatory employment practices with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, repealing the prohibition against certain damages in cases alleging age-based discrimination, and making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1367.
That is the proper motions. Further discussion on 1367. Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members, colleagues. If you're considering whether or not you should take a break, go get some dinner, take a nap, this could be the time. House Bill 1367 on its face is fairly innocuous, except for sections 3 and 4. Now, you really can't explain sections 3 and 4 unless you understand pretty much all of the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, which is found at 2434 and 101 et sec. And you got to understand how this works so you understand how this is going to affect those who've hired someone to take care of their child, a nanny, someone who would maybe take care of their elderly relative, a housekeeper, a caretaker for yourself. And I'm not talking about contractors, I'm talking about people that work for you so intimately that they are employees in your home. Now, the bill is a bill for an act concerning modifications to the law prohibiting discrimination in employment practices. That's the title, and of course, and in connection therewith, repealing the exclusion of domestic workers from the definition of employee. And then there's some other stuff. But it's the extending the exclusion of domestic workers from employee it's kind of a problem. So you have to understand the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, what it does and how we define discriminatory acts. Now, first of all, much like Title VII, there are protected classes of people and reasons that you cannot use to hire or refuse to hire or terminate or refuse to promote or make a raise. In fact, it's probably better to start with 2434 or 402, discriminatory or unfair employment practices definition. Starting right here. It is a discriminatory or unfair employment practice. That means that you'd be liable. For an employer, we're going to get to that in a moment because statutes have definitions. Right now, an employee is someone who works for an employer. It's somewhat circular. And an employer is any person employed by an employer except a person in the domestic service of any person. Now,
That means a housekeeper, that means a nanny, that means a caretaker in your home for maybe your elderly father or mother. That might be someone who works in your home as your cook, assistant, everything. It's a pretty, you know, it's a one-off. It's a single employee in your home. And heretofore, the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act has excluded that employee, that hire, that person who's your child's nanny from your mom's caretaker from the Anti-Discrimination Act. Why was that as a matter of policy? Well, the Anti-Discrimination Act prohibits discrimination of all forms. We'll get to that in a moment. Several pages to read. And when you hire someone to be a nanny for your children, when you hire someone to be the caretaker for your elderly relative, you may have some very personal preferences. And they may even be discriminatory things. But you're not in business. You're not a public accommodation. You're not even a cake baker baking cakes out of a storefront. You're a person who has another job and is doing something else, and you're working at that, and the money is coming out of your own paycheck or maybe out of the money that your mom or dad saved so they wouldn't have to go in the nursing home. So what this bill does in a few lines here is says, if you're that person, you can have a civil rights complaint filed against you. Now let me back up and tell you that as a simple country lawyer, sometimes my small business clients come to me and say, well, I've had one of these filed, you know, I have an older person working for me, he or she had excessive absenteeism. It may have had to do with health. I've complied with FMLA and all of those things, but I just had to let them go. It just wasn't working. That small business employer is almost inevitably today, because of the actions of the General Assembly, almost inevitably today going to have a civil rights action filed against them. In fact, my standard advice in those situations is you might want to do some sort of severance agreement and just save yourself the heartburn. And that's going to be what's going to happen to everyone who hires a nanny or a caretaker for their elderly relative or a cook or a housekeeper. Why is that? Well, it's a discriminatory or unfair employment practice for an employer, now that's that single individual, to refuse to hire, to discharge, or to promote or demote, to harass during the course of employment, or to discriminate in matters of compensation, terms, conditions, privileges of employment against any individual otherwise qualified because of disability, race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, religion, age, national origin, or ancestry. But with regard to a disability, it is not a discriminatory or unfair employment practice for an employer to act as provided in this subsection 1A if there is no reasonable accommodation that the employer can make with regard to the disability actually disqualifies the individual from the job, and the disability has a significant impact on the job. Now, let's start right here. I'm a simple country lawyer. I have to parse that sentence quite a bit. Now, every
every household in the state of Colorado who may hire a nanny, who may hire a cook, who may hire a housekeeper. And they're not going to be independent contractors under the federal law. I got news for you. They're going to be employers, and you're going to withhold Social Security tax. And they're going to be an employee. And this bill says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of any of those reasons. Now, you can say, well, you shouldn't be discriminating. So, you know, my mother is 93 years old, and she was able to stay in her home for a long time, and unfortunately has had to go to an assisted living center. But prior to that, we, my brother and I, hired someone to stay with her in the evenings. And now, my mother has a particular set of views. She has a particular religion. She's 93 years old. She's set in her ways. I'm not going to hire just anybody, because as she's advancing in age, she feels more and more insecure. I'm probably going to want to make some distinctions on the basis of religion. And you say, well, you might be able to slip that in without anybody noticing. Well, I don't want to make people lawbreakers. I just want to say, if you're going to have such a personal relationship, then you're going to need to do that. So, it is true that I can say under this law, well, I want a woman to come and stay with my mom, because everybody said, well, notwithstanding any other provision of this section to the contrary, it's not discriminatory or unfair employment practice with respect to sex for a person to consider sex when hiring an employee engaged in child care related. Well, actually, it's not so. I mean, my mother's not child care. So, if I put an ad in the newspaper, I can't put an ad in the newspaper for the caretaker for my mom that says, wanted, reliable older woman with good Christian values to care for elderly parent. I will have violated by saying older. I will have violated by saying woman, and I will have surely violated by saying Christian values. And yet, and you can choose your own. If you're of the Muslim faith, you may very well want someone who knows and understands the Islamic faith. If you're Jewish, you may very well want someone who understands Jewish faith and traditions. But if you advertise for that, if you ask for that, now, you will have violated this. Now, we had a witness who was asked a little bit about that by the chair of the committee, and she said, well, I'm not a lawyer, I don't exactly know. There was some talk about bona fide occupational qualifications. That's what lawyers refer to as BFOQs. But I don't think that's a bona fide occupational qualification. That person could say, well, I can learn about that faith and I can accommodate it. That's not That's not like having to be it's not like having to be a male to play a male role in a movie. Everything else in this bill is completely innocuous. I mean, it does important things for those who file complaints, and it gives them different time limits and extended time limits, and no one has any particular objection to that. I asked some business groups who opposed a more far-reaching bill last year, and opposed it till midnight, mind you. I said, why aren't you guys on board to do something about this provision? This is going to affect every household in Colorado. Not big employers, not even small employers. Everybody who, because they need to hire a nanny for their child, a caretaker for their elderly parent, someone to assist in their home because they travel a great deal. It's going to affect every one of them. And the answer to me was, you know, that's bad, but it's not going to affect our members that way. Well, it is going to affect their members who are working and have to hire someone. But it didn't go to the business interest. So who's going to represent those families? Well, that's what we're here for. So nobody came to me and said, Senator Gardner, I need you to run an amendment. Senator Gardner, I need you to, this bill's coming in front of you. Just in case anyone's wondering, the reason I'm standing down here is all me. All my concern for my constituents and families in Colorado, that they're going to be exposed to civil rights actions for what in so many ways is an understandable and largely innocent situation. Not an unreasonable thing. And it's not commerce in the sense of a public accommodation. They're not providing a public accommodation for sure. They're hiring people in their home. I won't read all of the pages here, but what will employers have to do if this person they hire? An employer shall provide reasonable accommodations to perform the essential functions on the job to an applicant for employment or an employee for health conditions related to pregnancy or the physical recovery from childbirth. Well, if you're XYZ Corporation, if you're the Colorado General Assembly, the state of Colorado, the city of Colorado Springs, or the large defense contractor across town, or the semiconductor manufacturer on the other side of town, that's one thing. But maybe making that accommodation for your child's nanny or the caretaker for your elderly mom, maybe that's not feasible. But you have to do that now. Not deny employment opportunities to an applicant or employee based on the need to make a reasonable accommodation related to the applicant's or employee's pregnancy, physical recovery from childbirth, or related condition. Well, that's a wonderful accommodation whenever we're talking about true and traditional employers. But now we're talking about households. And that may not be what's wanted or needed. Now,
because you're an employer, you're going to have to do some things here. I hope you have a lot of space on your refrigerator, because the employer shall provide written notice of the right to be free from discrimination or unfair employment practices pursuant to this section to new employees at the start of employment and existing employees within 120 days after August 10, 2016. That's when this passed. The employer shall post the required notice in a conspicuous place in the employee's place of business in an area accessible to the employees. I hope you got a lot of refrigerator front. Now here's another, and this is interesting because this is in 2434-4025, and it says, and this has been here for a long time. It's called the Smokers Law. Doesn't say anything about smokers in it, but when it got passed, it was about tobacco companies being upset that employers might tell people they couldn't smoke. And so they passed this law that says, it shall be a discriminatory or unfair employment practice for an employer to terminate the employment of any employee due to that employee's engaging in any unlawful activity off the premises of the employer during non-working hours unless such a restriction relates to a bona fide occupational requirement or is reasonably and rationally related to the employment activities and responsibilities of a particular employer or a particular group of employees rather than to all employees of the employer, or is necessary to avoid a conflict of interest with any responsibilities to the employer or the appearance of such a conflict of interest. So, what's been challenged here? Well, the cases I've seen are social media postings. So you find out that your nanny is making the crudest, rudest, lewdest social media postings, and you say, I don't think I want you taking care of my child anymore. Well, she says, I didn't do anything wrong on the job. And I said, yeah, but I want a person of the right attitudes and values to take care of my child. I want a person of the right attitudes and values to be taking care of my mother when I'm traveling and I can't see to her. You're fired, or I'm going to let you go. I wish you well, just not working out. However you say it. A violation of the law. Or what if you don't want your children around a smoker? And you have to give that employee a break. Under the law, you got to give them 15 minutes, and I don't have it in front of me, but you got to do all that. So they want to go outside. They go out on the sidewalk and smoke on their break. You violated the law. This bill is so indicative of the entire 73rd General Assembly, reaching and overreaching into the personal lives and decisions of our citizens, and exposing them to ever more and greater liabilities at the courthouse in order to protect everyone from everything all the time. Now, don't be confused and don't misconstrue. I support Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. I supported the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act until we tried to
and I support it with respect to larger employers. I supported the prohibition of discrimination against pregnancy, childbirth, for businesses and for places of public accommodation, for employers of the commercial traditional sense. But you're going to hire somebody to be in your home, to take care of you, to take care of your child, to take care of your mother, your father, maybe your disabled child, and you cannot discriminate in your choices based on things that we all do very well in choosing friendships and choosing who we admit to our home. It's domestic workers. By definition, it's in your home. This is so far-reaching, without the blink of an eye. Without the blink of an eye. And it's curious to me, we see that in the House, there was an amendment because someone said, well, I shouldn't have to. I'd really love to see who carried this and why they carried it. You just know it's one of the young moms in the House says, well, I don't want to have to hire someone of a different sex to take care of my child. So we added one in to accommodate that. Really? Do we believe this? Do we believe it? Well, I don't believe any of it, so I look at it and I go, well, why are we making an exception for that? Why can't we make an exception for people who have particular religious beliefs and want to inculcate those values? I mean, you could make a case that there might be a bona fide occupational qualification here, but we're going to litigate that, and you know, why? And we're going to, you know, I'll have colleagues toss their hand off and go, oh, well, you know, that doesn't happen. Oh, if I can think of it. I've been trained to think of causes of action, and when people come and say, I wasn't treated fairly, I've been trained to figure out how to make sure that people are treated fairly and to get them some money for it. Now, I have a solution to this, and it's an easy solution, and we can pass the rest of the bill.
There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read L9?
Amendment L09009.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Please move the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Or is it Ms. Chair?
Whichever.
Apparently it's they, them, and theirs. I move L009.
To the amendment, Senator Gardner.
Thank you. L009 is a bunch of strike and this and that and the other. It really is very clear. You amend the REIB and gross bill at page 2, strike lines 10 through 12. So you go to 2, 10 through 12. Because there's a reference to domestic workers there that needs to be removed. You renumber the succeeding paragraph accordingly. You go to page 3, strike lines 4 through 7. where it says afford domestic workers the same protections against discrimination and harassment in the workplace that are afforded other workers in the state. That's what I discussed for you. And then to the meat of it, and you renumber the sections accordingly. I won't go through those. You go to page 4, you strike lines 15 through 27 because that is all of this, and page 5 and strike 1. And then on page 1, you clean up the title and you're good. Members, this is important to do. It is important because we do not want to impose this onerous legal regime on citizens in Colorado who themselves are only employers by virtue of needing to hire for a family need, by virtue of domestic workers. I think I've made the case for L09. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Woodward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had a chance to look at L009 and hear the arguments that the good senator from Colorado Springs put in front of us today, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. This bill goes a long way to make the state of Colorado a very difficult place for mom and pops and small business to find their way through the vigorous number of policies and rules that we put on them. So I think that if we turn this back to the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and begin to follow federal law, we will accomplish a very fair outcome without complicating the matters for local and small business and mom and pops here in the state of Colorado. So I urge an aye vote.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I encourage a no vote. And there's been a lot of good discussion about domestic workers, which I will continue after we vote on the amendment.
The motion is the adoption of L009. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The noes have it, and L009 is lost. To the Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to extend the debate and belabor this for a long time, but I feel like I have to address some of the issues that have been brought up. First, let's talk about why including domestic workers in protection is so incredibly important. And the first thing is workers are often in power dynamics where they are more easily harassed, more easily discriminated against, and treated badly. That power dynamic is even more when you are walking into someone's home, when you are in their domain, when you have to follow their culture, their rules, and having some basic protections for domestic workers is incredibly important. And let's talk about why domestic workers are generally excluded from our rules. It's because these employment laws started in the era of the Emancipation. And at that time, freed slaves were limited in where they could work and where they could not work. And generally, they could work only in farms, fields, and domestic labor. And so they were left out of a lot of the early protections to protect workers. The reason domestic workers are left out of our employment laws is based in our country's history of white supremacy. When you look at who are domestic workers, we've talked about gender and race and religion. They tend to be low income, women of color, some of the most vulnerable people in our society to protections. That's why we need protections for our domestic workers. And so we did have a lawyer actually in committee. Yeah, we had one person that said, I believe in protecting domestic workers, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer and I believe in it. But we actually did have a really good lawyer who did walk through bona fide occupational qualifications. Now, the good country lawyer brought up that, and that could create lawsuits, but it also provides protections. And I could go through different cases and different examples, but basically what a bona fide occupational qualification means is, sure, if your elderly mother wants someone of her own religion and her own gender to take care of her, you can say that's a bona fide occupational qualification. There are exceptions for gender, there's exceptions for values, which includes religion, but these domestic workers 100% absolutely deserve protection. And to say that this is completely new and we should go back to federal law, well, 8 other states have provided these protections for domestic workers, and I haven't heard from these 8 other states that they suddenly lost all the caregivers for their children and elderly mothers, and those states are doing just fine, and their domestic workers have protection.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess we can wave our hand away and say, well, yeah, there's going to be some lawsuits, but these people need to be protected. Well, look, I want to announce to everyone that the 14th and 15th Amendment were passed right after the Civil War. And as a matter of civil liberty, people can go where they wish. I don't make light of the fact that we all have economic constraints. I have economic constraints. I'd live in a different neighborhood if I was wealthier. I might have a domestic servant if I were wealthier. But as to the question of bona fide occupational qualifications, this poor simple country lawyer learned that really well. It's a very narrow thing. And just because mother would be more comfortable with someone that looked like her doesn't mean that it's an occupational qualification. And maybe there'll eventually be a court case that'll say for domestic service that's okay. But I guess I would say to you, I didn't hear that in committee, and I didn't hear that from the sponsor. And the sponsor admits she's not a lawyer, so she's not prepared to go through the law of bona fide occupational qualification with you. I can do that tonight. I hadn't prepared to do that. I could ask some of my colleagues to come down here and talk for 15 or 20 minutes while I put that presentation together so we can spend an hour doing it. But this is worth the doing, and this is worth the talking, members. This bill is wrong for families in Colorado. It is wrong for the people of Colorado. Are there people who hire domestic workers who are not good employers? I'm sure there are. I don't mean to be cavalier, but go somewhere else. Well, there's not everybody hiring everywhere. Well, the person who's doing the hiring is not XYZ Corporation. It's not a local government. It's a person in a household, domestic worker. And when you get one of these claims, they're going to want wages, attorney's fees, cost. My advice to anybody is don't hire one. Or hire through an agency and then you can send them on their way. But that'll drive up the cost. And then people won't be able to do it. Or they'll try to do it as independent contractors when that's really not what they are, and that will be its own problem. And I'm guessing that most of the claims are going to be from au pairs. whose big brother went to law school. So they know how to file these complaints. And they get ticked off personally at the employer who's, you know, a demanding mom or someone who's demanding for their parent, right, wrong, or indifferent. And then you get slapped with a $25,000 lawsuit. Claim. Year's wages. Can't find another job. You're supposed to mitigate, but can't find one because, after all, once it gets around that you sued your last employer, I'm going to find some reason. Either I'm just not going to hire, or I'll think of some reason why the other person was way more qualified. No matter, by the way, my discrimination won't be based on race, religion, ethnicity, orientation. It'll be a retaliatory claim for having made the other claim, but I'm not going to say that Mr. Jones down the street said, yes, she worked for us, and then we got sued. You know, it's helpful when you read statutes to go through the cases that are associated with them. So, you know, you'll look at 2434-402, which is amended here, and let me point out to you so you understand and you know that I'm talking to the bill. 2434-402 is going to say, notwithstanding any other provision of this section to the contrary, I'm sorry, you're going to go up above and you're going to, 2434-401 says, employee is any person. Now it's going to be an individual. I guess, I don't know. Maybe it's a non-person individual employed by an employer. And we're taking out the except a person in the domestic service of any person. You can't be in the domestic service of a corporation. So, what are the cases that arise here? Well, you get where a prima facie case of discrimination is proven and the reasons given for discharge are found to be a pretext for discrimination, no additional evidence is required to infer intentional discrimination. The following procedure applies in claims of employment discrimination. This is what the family is going to have to deal with. First, the complainant must initially establish a prima facie case of discrimination. Now, a prima facie case of discrimination is this. I'm from a protected class of a particular race, particular ethnicity, a particular religion, a particular over the age of 40. Sexual orientation, I have a disability, I was pregnant or recovering from childbirth, and you fired me. Prima facie case. Shift the burden of proof. Now the burden is on the person, the employer, to prove otherwise. If the complainant establishes a prima facie case of discrimination, the burden of production shifts to the employer to articulate some legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for the employment decision. Oh, well, all you have to do is articulate that she wasn't showing up on time and she was rude to my elderly mother. Once the employer meets its burden, the
Complainant must then be given a full and fair opportunity to demonstrate by competent evidence that the presumptively valid reasons for the employment decision were in fact a pretext for discrimination. Oh, well, easy. $25,000 later, if you're lucky. So what do I tell you in my office? I say, you probably need to just settle that thing out. Unless you want to pay me. It's the job, it's the business I'm in. I'm happy if you want to do that. And I will give it my all. We will go to court with you. We will stand in front of the jury. We will talk. And we will convince the jury, we hope, because you don't know what juries are going to do. And so for a year and a half of your life, you are going to be tied up with this because you hired a nanny. So, you know, for instance, you have to make a reasonable accommodation. What if the person you hire, you later find out has some difficulty? Can you make an accommodation? Well, then I'm on the phone with a homeowner, family, explaining what a reasonable accommodation is. And, you know, if the person can't walk upstairs and the job is in a two-story house, you probably can't make an accommodation. But I don't know, is it a reasonable accommodation if there's a few steps out in front of the house and it's single level? Do I have to build a ramp? Well, that's not unreasonable. Now I'm building a ramp for the person I hired. You know, a lot of people are going to try to get around this. I think they're going to say, you need to resign. I have a letter of resignation. Well, a mere signed statement that resignation is voluntary does not relieve the employer of consequences of an act amounting to constructive discharge. So even if, by the way, even if the person comes in and says, I'm quitting because that situation was fraught with conflict, that former employee, the former caretaker for your mom or dad, who can't find another position because everybody knows that he or she was hard to get along with, but they're going to say, it was because of my religion, it was because of my race, it was because of my age. And I say, but you quit. Oh yeah, I was constructively discharged. I was constructively fired. You made the workplace unbearable for me to work. It was no longer a workable situation. There are a lot of the constructive discharge cases. I can see those happening every time. You know, this is another bill that the lawyer me thinks is just fabulous. Probably build a whole cottage law firm. I could start running TV ads for all the people sitting in front of the TV because they no longer are working as a caretaker for someone's parent or a child, and they're sitting there watching the daytime TV. They're watching Jerry Springer. It's probably not Jerry Springer anymore. There you go. Have you been fired from your job as a nanny or a caretaker? You may be a victim of discrimination. Did you know you can't be fired because of your religion, your age, your race, or for engaging in social media posts that are inflammatory if they don't have anything to do with your employer? You know that? We're here to help you. The strong arm's already taken. We'll call it the boot. We're creating that system. For people who hire nannies, for people who hire, we're creating that system. Now, I don't want anyone to think that I'm naive enough to think that there are not people who are discriminatory. In my own life, I've had people that wouldn't hire me was because I was from Texas. Now, that's actually not a protected class. It's unfair to me. I've had people say, I just don't like Texans. But it's not a protected class, but it seems unfair. I have a lot of people say I don't like lawyers. Not a protected class. Let me say it one more time. All of the anti-discrimination protected classes, I support them. I support them for regular employers, for places of public accommodation, for housing, but I do not believe that the government should inject itself into what is essentially not intended to be a commercial activity. It's, maybe it's well-intentioned. I guess it is well-intentioned. We're going to protect people from we're going to protect people from working for jerks in a domestic situation. I get it. Ironically, there's a lot of case law, I say a lot, there's a fair amount of case law of cases where someone worked for an employer who was a complete and total, I won't use the phrase here, but a jerk. But that employer was a jerk to everybody. And so the finding of the court was there was no discrimination. They treated everybody badly. And I suspect that more than anything is probably what is trying to be remedied here. Is someone who is in a situation in their home and they are the employer and they like it the way they like it and they're going to do it the way they do it. And the last I heard was it's really hard to find people to do this work. So don't be a jerk. Be a good employer. But if you're a jerk and you're a jerk to everyone you ever employed, you probably haven't violated this. That may be the first and primary defense. Members, colleagues, this is just wrong. It's just wrong to do to the people of Colorado, create more lawsuits for exercising some preferences about who they would like to have take care of their children. It's even doubly wrong because we're going to take care of professional moms when hiring an employee engaged in a child care related domestic services, not elder care domestic services. That's probably age discrimination itself on the face of the statute. And by the way, maybe I've got a federal lawsuit there. See, when you're a lawyer, you just can't help but think of these things. And as I think about it, I think there's a federal lawsuit here. It would be easy enough for us to move on this evening. Simple amendment. It was rejected. It'll be easy enough for us to move on thirds, but that won't happen. This is bitterly disappointing to me. I ask for a no vote. We'll have an opportunity for a committee of the whole amendment. We can talk about it more then. Thank you.
Motion is the
Chair.
adoption. You got it.
Thank you, Chair.
Motion is adoption of 1367. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1367 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of 1380?
House Bill 1380, Representatives Gonzalez Gutierrez and Pelton, and Senators Bridges and Quorum, concerning creating comprehensive statewide systems to provide improved access to critical program services that support low-income households, and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senatorial file has been requested and granted. Okay, now the mics are back on. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I move House Bill 1380 and the Finance Committee report.
The Finance Committee report, Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We made a minor tweak in the Finance Committee and ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Finance Committee report is adopted. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of 1380. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1380 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1393?
House Bill 1393, Representatives Tipper and Soper, Senators Gonzalez and Moreno, concerning creating the Displaced Agrarian Scholarship for the descendants of agrarians displaced by the development of the Auraria Higher Education Center, and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1393 on second reading.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of 1393. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1393 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1358 lay over to the end of the calendar.
The motion is for House Bill 1358 to lay over to the end of the calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1358 will lay over to the end of the calendar. Would the clerk please read the title of 1397?
House Bill 1397, Representatives Harridan, Gonzalez Gutierrez, and Senator Moreno, concerning the creation of the statewide equity office in the Department of Personnel, and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1397 on second reading.
The motion is for the passage of 1397. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1397 is adopted.
Will the clerk please read the title to 1409?
House Bill 1409, Representatives Harrod and Tatone, Senators Coleman and Heisey, concerning additional funding for the Community Revitalization Grant Program.
Appropriations. Senator Coleman, you have 1409 and appropriations report.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem and Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1409 and the Appropriations Committee report.
Appropriations.
The Appropriations Committee appropriated funding. We ask for an aye vote.
All those in favor of appropriations reports, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the appropriations report is adopted. To the bill.
We ask for an aye vote.
See no further discussion. The motion is the adoption of 1409. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1409 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title to 1400?
Senate Bill 1400, Representatives McCluskey and Tipper, Senator Moreno, concerning matters related to a procedural requirement for state enterprises.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over the balance of the special orders calendar until later this evening.
Motion is to lay over the balance of the special order calendar until later this evening. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and we will lay over the balance of the second reading calendar until later on this evening. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the committee's rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed no. The ayes have it. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills in consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations on. House Bill 1394 is amended, House Bill 1233 is amended, House Bill 1314 is amended, House Bill 1011 is amended, House Bill 1051, 1151 is amended, 1240, 1281, 1302 is amended, 1303 is amended, 1308 is amended, 1367, 1380 is amended, 1393, 1397, 1409 is amended, passed on second reading, and ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bills 1400, 1012 is amended. House Bill 1358 laid over until later in the evening and retaining their place on the calendar.
Senatorial 5.
Will the clerk please add Senator Priola to the roll and excuse Senator Smallwood from the roll? The Senate will stand in a senatorial 5. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the adoption of the report.
Motion is for the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. There is probably an amendment at the desk. It's fine. Will the clerk please read Cow Amendment 001?
Cow Amendment 001.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment 001.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I know it was a very, very long time ago, so let me refresh your memory. This is the Committee of the Whole Amendment on my amendment L009 to the addition to Anti-Discrimination Act of domestic employees. The reason this is worth doing a Committee of the Whole amendment on, despite the probable and inevitable conclusion, is that what this bill does with this provision in it that my amendment would have taken out is expose every family, every person in Colorado who hires a nanny, hires a cook or a housekeeper, hires someone to take care of an elder relative, exposes them to a civil rights complaint and liability for discrimination. And they will learn what small businesses have learned is that if you hire anyone of any protected class, and that's about everybody except, well, even me because I'm old. But I understand that probably the perception is not that we're protected, but nevertheless, almost anyone. And if you even have a bad relationship with the person and they quit, they can claim constructive discharge and turn around and file a complaint. The very answering of that complaint will cost you hours and hours and hours of time. If you think filling out your tax form is a nightmare, and by the way, during the discussion, I noted that you better have a lot of space on the front of your refrigerator because you're going to have to post all of those minimum wage posters, everything about where to contact people, where to do. Don't forget your workers' comp insurance while you're at it. Members, this is your opportunity to stand up for the people and families of Colorado. The rest of the bill is fine. I don't have a problem with it. It extends some deadlines. It is favorable to complainants, but not in a way that's unfair. This is not good for Colorado families. It is not good for people living in Colorado. I ask for an aye vote on Cal 001.
Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, this morning in approps, because I had an early bill and then I had the last bill, so I was there pretty much the whole time. But I heard the good senator from Colorado Springs kind of make this argument there that hey, what about hiring somebody for your mom, your parents, or your dad, for a disabled person? And so I've had most of the day to think about it, and then I've had more time to think about it. Here in the last 45 minutes, I didn't time it, maybe 2 hours. Okay. And I think I mentioned at one point here that we lost my mom the day after Christmas this past year. Actually, we lost Mom probably a couple of years before that, but she passed the day after Christmas, and she was staying with my sister, who had a full-time job, still does. Fortunately, she was the boss. She had a little flexibility there, but that also meant she had to put in extra time. It was just a matter of when that extra time got put in.
But the last couple of years there, we had to have help. Debbie couldn't handle all the responsibilities anymore. She could not be in the house all the time, and Mom really couldn't be left alone for virtually any length of time at all. So me being 1,250 miles away, all I could do was, go Debbie, do a good job, hope it works for you. So she hired somebody, I believe she went through an agency. Well, that didn't work well. That didn't work well. This was a young lady, mature individual, but a young lady. And my mom's always been a little strong-willed, and she didn't lose any of that as she got older and kind of wasn't quite as rational as she used to be. So Mom just decided she didn't like this young lady, and that didn't last probably 2 weeks. In fact, I think it lasted less than 2 weeks. And this was on a part-time basis, coming in at that time, I think 3 days a week, half a day at a time. And so Sister calls the agency and says, sorry, this isn't working out, and that person went away, no problem, nobody got sued, nobody was threatened with anything. But that does not solve my sister's problem of somebody to stay with Mom when she can't be there. And so she goes about finding somebody else who I do not believe came through an agency. Turned out to be somebody that lived in the same little town that I grew up in, and Mom and sister still lived in. And they were 10 miles away, maybe. I think it was a personal referral. Lady is more mature, a little older, really sweet, loves Mom. This seemed to be a good match. And again, kind of going back to Mom being a bit strong-willed, she overheard this fine lady and my sister talking about how the day went, and of course that included how it went with Mom, and Mom was doing I heard you guys talking about me. I don't want you talking about me. So they learned to communicate with written notes on those types of matters. But this lady came in regularly, and as time progressed, more often, still just for half a day at a time. It turned out to be an absolute wonderful match, completely patient with my mom. Eventually, we lose Mom. And this lady was just so kind and so sweet. And the kids, I'm a kid, the kids all agreed, that this lady ought to have a bonus. And so sister wrote her an extra little check, nothing that was going to take care of her for any length of time, but it was just an appreciation thing. But thinking about what could have happened in that situation, thinking about what will we do when we're kind of in that situation again, because my sister has never married, doesn't have any kids. She made it possible. There's a special place in heaven for my sister. She made it possible for both Mom and Dad to be able to live at home until they passed, which is what they wanted. She gave up some good years of her life to make that happen. But at some point, somebody's going to be making those decisions for my sister. And now we have laws like this on the books. If that first person doesn't work out and the second person doesn't work out and things start changing, and we're going to want somebody that kind of believes the way my sister does. Probably going to want a lady. Probably going to want someone that is maybe willing to do just a bit more than what the job description requires, just because it makes my sister happy. And if we can't find those things and go through 3 or 4 people, and we end up with 3 or 4 lawsuits out of it, all of a sudden there's no money left to take care of my sister. So I would encourage an aye vote on this Cow amendment.
The motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment 1 to the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? Senators Donovan, Jaquez Lewis, Coleman, Majority Leader Moreno, Henriksen, Fields, Gonzalez, Bridges, Buckner, Lee, Winter, Pedersen, Danielson, Rodriguez, Hanson, Zenzinger, Janal, Kolker, Story. Please add the president. With a vote of 13 ayes, 20 noes, 0 absent, 2 excused, the amendment is lost. The motion before the body is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 2 excused, Committee of the Whole report is adopted. House Bills 1394 is amended, 1233 is amended, 1314 is amended, 1011 is amended, 1051, 1151 is amended, 1240, 1281, 1302 is amended, 1303 is amended, 1308 as amended, 1367, 1380 is amended, 1393, 1397, 1409 is amended, passed on second reading in order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1400, 1012 is amended, House Bill 1358 laid over until May 6, 2022 and retaining their place on the calendar. Message from the House.
May 6, 2022, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the Reviser of Statutes Senate Bill 183, 165, 27, 113, amended as printed in House Journal May 3, 2022. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the Reviser of Statutes Senate Bill 208, amended as printed in House Journal May 3, 2022, and amended on third reading and as printed in House Journal May 6, 2022. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the Reviser of Statutes Senate Bill 196, amended as printed in House Journal May 4, 2022. The House has passed on third reading and returns herewith Senate Bill 223.
Message from the Reviser.
May 6, 2022, we herewith transmit without comment as amended Senate Bill 27, 183, 165, 113, 208, and 196.
Message from the Governor.
Friday, May 6, 2022, Colorado Senate. Honorable members of the Colorado Senate, pursuant to the authority vested in the office of the Governor of the State of Colorado, I have the honor to inform you that I have approved and filed with the Secretary of State the following acts. Senate Bill 49, Victim Rights Act, approved on Friday, May 6, 2022 at 2:55 p.m. Senate Bill 156, Medicaid Prior Authorization and Recovery Payment, approved on Friday, May 6, 2022 at 2:55 p.m. Senate Bill 157, Information Sharing for Consumer Protection Investigation, approved on Friday, May 6, 2022 at 2:55 p.m. Senate Bill 164, Correction Property Tax Disclosure Information Metropolitan District, approved on Friday, May 6, 2022 at 2:55 p.m. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Signing of bills.
May 6, 2022, the President has signed Senate Bill 238, Senate Bill 11, 18, 34, 35, 58, 79, 97, 158, 184, and 194.
Announcements. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members of Senate Appropriations, we will have our 7th and final meeting of the week. We will start in 15 minutes, so let's call it 7:25. We will be hearing in room 357 Senate Bill 239, and then House Bills 1004, 1115, 1119, 1122, 1131, 1205, 1221, 1242, 1254, 1259, 1315, 1323, 1345, 1346, 1355, 1362, 1370, 1377, 1385, 1392, 1406, and 1416. 6 of those bills are committee of reference. I look forward to seeing everyone at 7:25 for Senate Appropriations.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate recess until upon adjournment of the Appropriations Committee.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand in recess.